Hello, everyone. You're listening to For Those We Lost. I'm your host, Jennifer Sullivan. Thank you for being here. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can go to the website forthosewelostpodcast.com and click on the contact button, and you can reach me that way as well. In this show, people share their stories of losing a loved one to COVID. Every story you hear in this show is full of heartbreak, grief, loss, and frustration, but they are also full of love and hope. We talk about how we are coping, we talk about how to keep the memory of our loved ones alive, and how isolating our grief is as the world wants to move on. You'll hear us talk a little bit about the vaccine and politics, and you may not agree, but I hope you'll keep listening because each person who shares their story on the show has experienced profound grief over the loss of a loved one. And that's something we will all experience. We all love someone, we will all lose someone we love, and we will all grieve. These are the stories of those we lost to COVID. Thanks for being here with me today, everyone. I've got a really great show coming up for you. Today, I'll be talking with Nora from California. Nora and her family live in the San Francisco Bay Area. She lost her father to COVID on April 29, 2021, at 12:30 in the morning. And later that day, at about 6 p.m., her husband's father also died of COVID. In this episode, Nora talks a lot about her father, her grief, her husband's grief, and how their family is coping with so much loss. We recorded this episode on October 18th, 2021. When we recorded this, we were closing in on 700,000 deaths from COVID in the United States. Today, as I finish editing this episode, we are over halfway to 800,000 deaths. As Nora and I talk about the numbers and COVID memorials, she mentions Rami's Heart Memorial, the COVID quilt, and a teddy bear project. All those links are in the show notes below. This show today is about Nora and her dad, Manuel Juarez, and her family's loss and path to healing. And with that, I'd like to welcome Nora to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you reaching out. I usually start with a question about the beginning of the pandemic, but your father passed away in late April of this year. And so I think I'm making the assumption that you all had a pretty good plan for how you handled COVID and what you did as a family. So if you just want to tell me a little bit about that and just where you were at right before your dad got COVID.
Yes. So when COVID started kind of coming out in, January, February, we started hearing in the news about some cases. And this was back in 2020. We thought we had a pretty solid plan. The kids went on to virtual education. I began working from home. My husband took some time off. He requested time off so that he can help with the schooling. And so, and then my dad, he didn't live with us. He lived in a different city, but, he was the same. He was at home. He would have, a neighbor take him to do some grocery shopping. And so, he would wear his mask. So, we had this plan. We had already set up, we're not going anywhere. We're shelter in place. Even, when the orders were lifted, we still continued with that same plan. We were like, nope, we're going to keep our family safe, and we're going to just order groceries into the house. We'll wipe them down. And, kids are doing online schooling, and I'm working from home permanently until everything is just completely down in cases. But, around the time when my dad got sick, this was now fast forward to April of 2021, he was going grocery shopping. The BART, public transportation was up and running. And, he would go, and twice a week, he had his routine. He would go buy his groceries, go to the market, and, we talked every day. And I would tell him, Dad, make sure you're wearing your mask. I am, in Spanish, he would tell me, I'm wearing my mask. And, there was a few times before April, and, in late 2020, around the holidays, where I would Uber him over to come to my house, or I would go pick him up. And he would wear his mask. And, I would see how he wore it. And I would tell him, always make sure it's over your nose and under your chin. And, we went through all of that. And he had, a little, a doctor's appointment, at the end of 2020. And my sister would take him to his appointments, and I had to take him to an appointment. And it was scary because you don't know who's sick around you, and so
Mm-hmm.
we were constantly just, having hand sanitizer on us, and, watching how he was, and just making sure that he was following all the proper protocol, which he was. And come April of this year, he became sick, and he was just, no, I'm not sick. No, I'm not sick. And that was his response. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I called him, as I did every other day. And I'm talking to him, hey, what are you doing? And, he's sniffling. I can hear him. And I go, Dad, you're sick. He goes, no, 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 I'm not sick. I have the allergies. I said, Dad, you sound sick. He said, no, I'm not sick. And this was on a Wednesday. So looking at his timeline, I knew he was in grocery shopping on Mondays and Thursdays. So kind of, I was hoping he was right. Part of me knew that he wasn't, but I was hoping he was right, that it was only allergies. And, from there, it just kind of progressed. From Wednesday, he had the sniffles. Thursday, I knew he was going to the market. He said, I told him, Dad, just stay home, please. He goes, I'm just going to pick up some medicines for the allergies. I said, okay. And, and then Friday, he called me, in the evening, and said, I'm going to take a shower. And I'm thinking to myself, he never tells me he's going to take a shower. He never calls me to inform me of what he's doing. So I called my sister, and, she's been in the medical field, for, 12 years, until she became a stay-at-home mom. But I said, hey, Dad kind of called me and said he was taking a shower. Can you just check in on him? She said, yeah. She called him, and, he said, I'm just going to take a shower. That's all. And, nothing else. And my sister said, are you sick? Do you need us to, take you to the doctors? He goes, no, 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 I'm fine. I just need to take a shower. So, that was Friday evening. And by Saturday evening, he called me and said, I'm burning up. Something's wrong. Something's wrong inside me. And he kept saying that something's wrong inside. I said, what's wrong? I don't know. It just feels like there's fire inside me.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, do you have a fever? He said, no, no, no. It's just inside. And so I initially thought he bought something that, he had a reaction to on Thursday from that allergy medicine. That was my immediate reaction. And so, we had him sent to Kaiser, which, luckily it was only 4 blocks away from his house. It was under 5 minutes. And so we called the public transportation, and, the Ubers, and I messaged the lady and said, I don't know what it is, but she said, okay, well, I'll just have all the windows open. And it was, within 5 minutes, they were at the ER. They tested him, and that's when we found out he was COVID positive, was on Saturday, the 17th.
Wow.
And so they had to transport him, because in the city he lives in, Richmond, they didn't have, I guess, a COVID wing. So they transported him over to Antioch, which is about, 25-minute drive or so. So he was there Sunday, and by Monday, the 19th, he was released, and he was home. And I'm like, and for me, I'm like, why is he being released? He needs to be in the hospital. Like, no one's at home to take care of him. He lives by himself. He's 78 years old. He should not be home alone. And my sister was explaining to me that sometimes if they're showing that they're, showing some improvement, they'll send them home because there's other risks and other they can get sick from other things.
Yeah.
So I still kind of felt like, no, he should stay. He should stay. And my sister said, it's okay. They sent him home. He'll be able to check his oxygen levels, and we'll keep calling him to check, check the levels of his oxygen. So we were doing that. We did that, Monday all day, and Tuesday, the next day, after being, only home for probably less than 24 hours, my sister called and said, "What are your levels?" And then he gave them to her. He goes, "That doesn't sound right. Are you giving me the right number?" So she's asking him, and she found that his numbers were actually low. His oxygen level was actually really low, and he was complaining of some chest pain. So we had him sent back into the ER on Tuesday, and this time we called the ambulance. We let them know he's COVID positive, and so the ambulance took him back to the ER. And by Wednesday, the following day, he was transported over to Oakland. So they took him to the Oakland facility, and it just went from bad to worse. That night, my sister received a call from the nurses and said that he is not compliant. He's trying to take off his mask. And I just remember her calling me on three-way, and I can hear the nurses struggling with him. And my sister was like, I try to calm him down, and next thing I know, they just say, he's coding, and then the phone hangs up. And so
Oh my goodness.
we waited. I was, in a panic. We were calling what happened. And my sister's like, they're probably not going to answer because they're probably all working on him right now. And so that night they called us back and said that he had tried to get out of bed. And because the oxygens went so low, he turned blue and just, they had to they were trying to hold him down and put the oxygen and tie him down, unfortunately, but he was still fighting it. So they said, if he does not comply, and we're not able to keep this mask, then we will have to intubate him. And so that was Wednesday the 21st. By Thursday the 22nd, he was intubated. They called us that morning and said, unfortunately, your dad's not getting better. He's fighting, and so we have to intubate him. So they also said they had to paralyze him because his body was just naturally fighting the tube. So
Yeah.
they had to just completely paralyze him. And we were all heartbroken. It was, we were so just, we were crying, and we were trying to FaceTime with him. And it was just definitely a hard time. And just watching him just so fragile. My sister and I were both just, we grew up with him, and he was always this strong man that just so independent and just always tried to do things to better his life and his children's life.
Mm-hmm.
And to see him just so fragile was just heartbreaking for us. And he wasn't getting any better, unfortunately. The doctors were telling us, and we were tracking his blood levels every day. They were running his tests twice a day, sometimes three times a day. And we were making charts and writing down his levels of everything, of his blood, of his oxygen, and my sister would just tell me, his kidneys are going, now his liver's going, so she would kind of explain to me what the numbers meant. Luckily, she said, we need to have him baptized. I don't think, we don't know, it's not going the way we want it to go. And so she contacted the cathedral in Oakland, and the father was nice enough to go and give him his anointing of the sick, and he baptized him. And that was on Monday, April 26th, and Thursday, April 29th at 12:35 a.m. he passed away.
Oh.
Yeah. And the unfortunate part was that on the same day, my father-in-law passed away, and he passed away on April 29th at 6:25 p.m. And, unfortunately, my husband couldn't be a part of it. I think for him, it's just, his grieving process has been very different. I'm very vocal and I want my dad's story told and I want to be able to continue to be his voice. And I think for my husband, it's just, it's taking him a little bit more time to kind of grasp everything that happened because it was just two blows in one day for our family.
Yeah, and your father-in-law passed away from COVID as well.
Yes, he did,
Yeah.
and he lived in Tehama County when it happened. So they were in 2 different counties and 2 different ages. He was 55, my father was 78. I know my husband, when he's ready to tell his dad's story, I'm sure, he'll tell it. It's, he's taking a little bit more time to understand and trying to understand and just, being in a place where we can talk about it.
Yeah, every person's grieving process is different. I
Mhm.
Even my sister and I, we lost our mom, but we're both in very different places with our grief. And I think that's just something that we all have to be gentle with ourselves and our loved ones around us about, that everybody grieves and works through it in a different way.
Absolutely.
So I have a couple of questions. So did you go see your father at all in the months before? Like, did you have family gatherings where you got together, or were you all just in your separate groups communicating through FaceTime or video calls?
So when the COVID first happened, we everyone was in their own households. And because they had shut down public transportation, my dad had nowhere to go. So we felt comfortable bringing him to our house in the first, maybe that first 6 months.
Yeah.
And so he did spend Thanksgiving with us. And again, we all had masks and we had like our windows open, but he was pretty much sheltered in place at that point. My sister as well, she came for 1 or 2 gatherings at the end of 2020. And then when 2021 hit, the numbers were still going up so much that we were just like, you know what, it's best for everyone to just kind of stay in their own places. So the last time we saw him was Christmas of 2020. And I remember on my birthday, on February 14th, he kept calling me and saying, come over, come over. And I'm like, Dad, we can't, it's just the numbers are too high. You're going grocery shopping again. We just can't risk it. And so, it broke my heart because I had to tell him no. But, he would just say, I have a present for you. I have a present for you. Whenever you can, any weekend, just come on over. And we just couldn't risk it, so at that point, everyone was just kind of doing their own thing. My sister was in her household, my dad was in his, and I was in my household with my family. And so, since the beginning of 2021, we've all just kind of stayed in our own households. The last gathering we had was my dad's funeral, and
Mm.
we buried him on May 24th, and the funeral home said that we can only have a limit of 20 people, which we were fine. We were only going to do our household anyways. We weren't going to have anyone coming. And it was outdoors. Everything was outdoors. The mass was outdoors, and everything was outdoors. So, we felt safe enough to get together and say our final goodbyes to him. But yeah, other than that, I hadn't seen him since December.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're in California, and I'm in Oregon, so we pay attention a lot to what happens on the West Coast. And I know that the California numbers have been staggeringly high from the beginning. Everything, when it started there was the summer of last year, and then you had a large wave in the winter time. So a lot of it, the way things worked out, and they worked out the same way here too, in January and February, the numbers were just so high with that winter surge. It makes sense that you would all just stay in your separate places and just kind of wait it out and hope for it to get better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it just, for me, it was just, it's been very unfortunate because, I just feel like also, a lot of it was downplayed in the beginning. My dad kind of had that sense like, oh, I don't think this is all real. And we kept telling him, it's real, Dad. It's real. Like, we have to be very careful. And, I know around the time that he was sick, it was around the time when California was opening up the vaccine to everyone over 16 years of age. And there
Mhm.
was already talk about, the mask mandates and allowing people that are vaccinated to have, to take off their masks if they were outdoors, and those are the things that I worry about because, they say all these things, but then you have the breakthrough cases now where people that
Mhm.
are vaccinated are getting COVID and dying. And so, for me, I'm just that person that I'm just scared. I'm so scared. And so I just stay indoors with my kids. We stay at home. We have a backyard that they can play in. They have a trampoline, they have a swimming pool. So, for us it's been, no, we're not going to trust in what's being told to us at this point about masks and the transmission of COVID. It's so scary because we still don't know a lot about it.
Yeah.
All we know is that people are getting sick and people are dying from it. I think my dad had some sense of, oh, this will blow over, everything will be
Mhm.
okay, and just, a little backstory of him, he was born in El Salvador. And, he was part of the military at such a young age. So he saw his fair share of violence and, trauma. And, he came to San Francisco in the 1970s. And that's when he met my mom, and they married in 1979. And we grew up in San Francisco in some of the more, areas where there is poverty, and so my dad worked, he would work as a body shop technician. And, my mom had a under minimum wage job cooking. My dad was somebody that just, he felt like, if you just work, 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 nothing's going to happen. But, that wasn't the case. He, in 1990, he was assaulted and, he had his femur broken and a knee. And so he had to have knee replacement surgery. And, I think of all of the stuff that he went through and everything he survived. And part of me is like, why couldn't he survive this? Why,
Yeah.
what was it about this disease that just takes them? And it's not, anything that you want for anyone. And it just, for me, I know it's such an isolated grief that we go through. I feel like I know so many people are grieving. And, I know the numbers are at 700,000 deaths in the US. And, just it, but it feels like it's just so isolated, like it's
Mhm.
just, it's hard to kind of really understand it, because I look at the past and I remember who he was and I remember everything he did and everything he's gone through. And I'm just like, why, why would this disease take so many lives? I know for my sister, it's, I know for her, it's the same thing. She does her part of, she grieves, like you said, differently. We both grieve differently. We both loved him very much. Um, but I think she's my older sister, so she's always been very mother-like. So I think for her, having to help raise two other children while she was, 7, 8 years old and having to stay home alone with a 6 and a 4 year old, she's learned to kind of cope in different ways
Mhm.
than I do. I'm the baby, so I cry like the baby. I talk about my emotions like a baby, and she's more like the mother, like everything's going to be okay. And she's very comforting in that way. She makes everything seem like it is going to be okay. For me, it's definitely just, remembering him and who he was. And talking with family because, we never met any of his family. He was very private. And after he passed away, we were able to locate a few siblings of his and just talk to them, who he was, what kind of person he was. We had no pictures of him prior to 1979 when when he and my mom were together. But they sent us a picture of him in the military, and he was 15. Handsome,
Wow.
handsome man. Yeah, he was such a
Hmm.
handsome, and he was a boy. I look at my son and I'm like, he's 14. And this was, he was only 15, my dad, when he was in the military.
Yeah.
So, for me, I think the coping has definitely been just unraveling some of his past and knowing who he was, and getting to know that side of my dad that we didn't get to know. We never, he was, I don't know if it was, just to kind of keep us from knowing what traumas he went through, or, if it was his own, um, way of coping with his traumas.
Yeah. Do you get to see your sister? Do you feel more or less isolated? Or do you spend time together and are able to sit and talk and share memories?
I, I feel, I think I feel more isolated since my dad has passed, only because the disease has now taken me to another level of fear,
Mm,
because it happened so close to home. But as far as the grieving, I think sometimes, we talk on the phone every day. Every day we're on the phone. We don't get together as much as we would like to. We recently saw her on Saturday. She baptized my two nephews, and so we were able to go to the cathedral, and it was a private ceremony, and it was very safe. And so we were in and out. It was the ceremony, and then we were like, okay, we have to go. Thank you for inviting us. I do feel like at times it's so isolated because I can't just stop and sit with her and say, hey, how are you doing? Because we're still in the pandemic. We're still in that fear of what could happen. And the younger ones aren't vaccinated. So, we have to protect my, 6-year old and my, 8-year old and her newborn and her 2-year old and her, 5-year old. So we have all these
yeah.
little ones that we still have to protect. I just, it breaks my heart because I know that, when my dad was sick, she was entering her third trimester of her pregnancy. And it was so hard because she wanted to just run to the hospital and be by
Yeah.
his side. And she was begging the doctors, please let me be with him. And they said, we can't risk it. We're so sorry. We just cannot risk it. You're pregnant, and, we're in a wing of only COVID patients.
Hmm.
So I know that definitely had, there was a lot of scarring just in that, in wanting to just be by his side.
Yeah.
And so, I think for us, it's just, she's good at saying, he's with us, and, saying the right thing at the right time. But I sometimes I feel bad wanting to cry to her because I don't want to build up all those emotions for her either.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, sometimes that's hard. All the tears that come. I
Mhm,
I remember last year at Christmas time I had to go off by myself and cry for
mhm.
the same reason. I didn't want to upset my sister because she seemed like she was doing so well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that was on Friday. I had just a complete meltdown because it was the thought of just, my nephews being baptized and my dad not being there. It was one of the first milestones that he wasn't there. So it was one of those moments where it's like, oh my God, get it together, put it together. We got to get it together. Tomorrow's a big day. And I texted her and said, I'm sorry, I'm crying a lot today. I don't know, I just wish my dad was here. And her response was, he is, he is here. He's with us. And so I'm like, okay, just we're okay. So I have to try to be I try to be as strong as her, but it's like you said, we all grieve in different ways. We all cope with it in different ways. And I cry a lot. So, but I just have to, I just kind of I cry on my times, and there's times where I cry in the bathroom, or I'll cry in the closet, and then I'm okay. And my daughters see me and they're like, "Are you sad because you're thinking of Bob?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm very sad because I'm thinking of him." And they're so sweet. They're like, "It's okay, mommy. I know he loves you. I know he loves you." So they kind of try to comfort me as well.
Yeah. So how are you planning to get through the upcoming holidays? Because you're in that first year of first without
Mhm.
your dad, and you just
Mhm.
went through one with the baptism. And then we have Thanksgiving, which is a
Mhm.
traditionally very family holiday, and then Christmas coming up. What are your plans? Do you have any? Have you had any thoughts about how you're going to cope with the holidays?
Yeah, I started writing in a journal recently, and
Oh,
that's just kind of my memory book, and I wanna be able to just remember as much of him as possible, because I know as I get older, our memory tends to fade, so I wanna be able to have something permanent where I can always remember stories of him. And so, I was thinking of that recently. I would go, "Wow, this is the first Christmas," and it was our favorite holiday. My dad loved Christmas, and so, for me, I think it's just continuing to tell his stories. I wanna be able to that day, talk to the kids and just talk about what memories we have of him, what was our favorite Christmas with him, and why, and then just continue to have his picture up. We have candles for him, we have flowers for him, and, visiting him at the gravesite has been, a huge, coping mechanism for me, just going to talk to him.
yeah,
I'm very blessed to have him 5 minutes away from where I live, so I just drive to him and I sit there, I'll water his plants, and, I'm hoping that by Christmas, he'll have his headstone, because it's taking a long time to get his headstone. We haven't been able to receive it yet. But we're hoping that by the holidays it's there so that we can have his picture and his flowers, and, just be able to just celebrate. And, for us, we are Catholic, so a lot of
yeah,
praying to him. I asked my mom yesterday, I said, "So what do you do, mom, when you think about him?" She says, "I pray. I pray." She says, "There's moments where I feel like I can't breathe, and I start thinking about him and my mom and her mom, my grandma." She goes, "And I start thinking about, your grandma and your dad." She goes, "And I just start praying." She said, "And then I kind of get a sense of calmness." And so, that made me feel good that she's finding ways, to cope with it in her ways, because she's old school. She doesn't talk about her emotions or her feelings. She's been very private as well. And so I was glad that I asked her that, because I wanted to know what she's doing, because, I don't see her every day either.
yeah,
Um, and so, I think that, we're going to have to, create a new tradition. Grandpa's not here, yes, but we have ways to remember him, and we'll have pictures of him, and we'll have stories of him. And, for Thanksgiving, the same thing. Maybe before we break bread, we talk about the memories of their grandpas, because it's not one, it's two grandpas.
yeah, yeah. You do have to. Yeah.
So we'll have, we have, right now we have a nice altar where we have, my father-in-law's urn, and we have my dad's picture, and we have flowers, and, and so the kids are able to see them. And, we're getting ready for Dia de los Muertos, which is coming up on November 1st,
Mm-hmm.
Day of the Dead. So, the kids are starting to make the little flowers and, different things to put up on the altar so that they can, remember them.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always thought that's a beautiful holiday, the Day of the
Mhm.
Dead,
Yes.
just because you get to celebrate them. And isn't it where you feel like they're close? Like
Yes.
they are right with you. Yeah, I love that.
Yes.
I love that. I have a little I have a couple of them actually, but I set up all the cards that I got, the condolence cards that I got.
Right.
And a friend of mine who lost her husband a year before COVID, she dropped it off on my doorstep, this like book of quotes and things about grief. And she wrote
Mm.
a sweet note inside of it. And then I have a bunch of the things that we had given my mom when she lived in memory care, because she had a small room that she shared with somebody else. So a lot of our big picture gifts that we used to give her, we had to scale down into very small things.
Right.
And so I have a bunch of pictures, and then I have those things. And every day I walk through that room and I talk to her and I say, "Hi, Mom." And there's times when the lights flicker or my computer acts up, and I'm like, "All right, Mom, enough already." And I don't know if it's her. I really, really don't. But it helps. It helps to feel like she's around.
It does. No, it
Yeah.
absolutely does. It's funny you said that because um, maybe about a week or so after my dad passed, our water kept turning on by itself. And I go, Dad, if you're mad at me, I'm sorry. And I'm just like, I'm thinking like, please don't be mad at me, because we were in the middle of making decisions for the funeral. And, it was such an intense time because there's so many decisions that have to be made. And I never realized, we've never had to go through anything like this. So my sister and I feel so bad, bless her soul. I would fight with her and I'm like, well, what do you want? She's like, well, let's put him in a suit, but he never wore a suit, and it was that constant bickering, and so one day the water faucet just kind of turned, the water starts turning on. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I turned it off and it kept sliding down. And I go, Dad, if that's you, I'm so sorry. I won't fight with my sister. And I just, I had to like, I told my husband, he said, oh no, it's loose. And he tightened it and he was fine. But I totally understand what you mean, because then you think, it makes you feel like they're here and they're
Yeah.
watching and they're listening, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, which I feel like is something that we hold on to because we weren't there. Like you
Hmm.
weren't there when your dad passed away. I
No,
wasn't there when my mom passed away. And you and I both got phone calls in the middle of the night cuz mine came at 12:30 in the
yeah.
morning on Monday morning. And so the isolation that you talk about, they die and we get these calls and we call our family members and we let them know, but then the world just kept going. And your kids log into school, I work remotely, it's just the normal things that you would do where you take time to plan a funeral and you spend time with family and you get those bereavement days from work, though none of those things really happened.
Mm-mm, they don't, you're right. My dad, and it was, my sister was a primary. So I still think of it to this day. I remember the call because at 12:36 my phone was vibrating and it said Kaiser. I said, "Oh no. Oh no." And
Uh,
my heart just dropped, because I would always get a call from my sister if anything happened, because she was a primary person that they would call on everything, on everything. And at 12:36 I remember answering and the doctor just said, hi, is this Nora? I said, yes. She said, I'm sorry to inform you. I said, no, 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 no. Please don't finish that. Please don't finish that sentence. I couldn't bear the news without having my sister with me, if that makes sense. Like,
mhm.
part of me always looks for my sister for some strength. And I remember just saying, can you please hold just for a second, just for 1 second? And I tried calling my sister and it went to voicemail. And I go, what's going on? My sister never turns off her phone. And so I said, I'm sorry, I'm trying to locate my sister. She said, I'm sorry, I have to let that your father has passed. And I just said, oh, please don't say that. Please just wait 1 second. Just give me one more second. And I remember my sister calling in that second. And I said, hello. She goes, oh my gosh. She goes, I'm so sorry. My phone, I don't know why it wasn't ringing. I said, oh, I have the doctor on the other line. I'm going to merge you in. She said, okay. I merged her in. And I said, okay, my sister's on the phone now. And so then she had to repeat it. I'm so sorry to inform you, but your father has passed away. And it was one of the hardest things that, you hear it and it's like you don't want to believe it. You can't
Mhm.
believe it. You're like, you know, what do you mean? We were waiting for a FaceTime and we never got the call for the FaceTime. So, what do you mean? And in my head I'm in denial in that second. Wait a minute. No, the nurse said he was gonna call us back for a FaceTime and we're still waiting for that FaceTime. It was definitely a moment where, it did feel isolated because I was depending so much on my sister to take that on, and
Mhm.
it breaks my heart when I think about it because she had to be that person that got the news and had to pass it along to everyone, and that's that 12:36 a.m. I had to take that call and I didn't want to.
Yeah.
I really did not want to take that call. And, I think about what you're saying and it's so true. You're just the next day, you have to still wake up and make breakfast for the kids and, talk to them and, and then you have to make arrangements to pick up, their belongings. And, my sister lives 45 minutes away and she's pregnant with two little ones at home, so it was really hard on her because, she wanted to do all these things. And I kept telling her, just let me handle what I can handle. I'm closest to him,
Yeah.
but, it was definitely, and then as you're, starting to accept it, then you get a second call. And then, I just hear my husband wailing. I had no idea what was going on.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
hear him wailing and, it's the evening time, and, we were talking about, getting his, which funeral home we were going to have my dad sent. And then we hear the call that, my father-in-law passed away. So then it was reliving that pain all
Mhm.
over again, and it was on the same day, it was just hours of a difference. When you think about it, it's like, we're still in a place where we're like, how did this happen to
Yeah.
both of our dads? How, why, why to your dad, why to my dad? And then for me, it was, I started going into a place where it was like, what did we do? Did we do something wrong in our life? And then it was having to even, just kind of talk to a therapist and say, this is what I'm going through and this is what I'm feeling. And having to really just, sometimes these things happen,
Yeah.
understanding that, like, sometimes it's unfortunate, but these things do happen.
Yeah, and your dad went to the market pretty much and that was it. So you have no idea at all how he got COVID.
No, we have
Wow.
no idea how my dad got COVID. We tried to do the tracing with him,
Yeah.
and he just said, I went on BART, I went to the market, went back on BART. So he was on public transportation. So it could have really been anywhere. It could have been
Yeah.
on the public transportation. It could have been at the market. We have no idea where.
Yeah. And I can't even imagine how contact tracing would work on the BART,
Right.
which is the Bay Area, your kind of light rail or your
Exactly.
train system. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be hard.
Yeah, it was really hard, and then then the state is calling you because they want to do the tracing as well,
Mhm.
and so I'm having to tell him he passed away. I'm sorry. I can't really tell you other than he was at this market and he would catch, the public transportation, and so there's really no way of knowing where he caught it.
Yeah. Yeah, about contact tracing, did you feel like that was, and this is just a random question I'm just thinking of, invasive, or did you feel like they really had a calm and understanding sense of just asking questions and being as polite as possible?
Yeah, I think they were just trying to figure out as much as they can and trying to be polite, but it is very I think it's very invasive in the sense that you're asking all these questions about where we're going, but we have no idea. So you obviously
Mhm.
won't have any idea. So what's the point of continuing this conversation? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And and we were in the grieving process right then and there. He had just passed away. And so, they called not once, they called maybe 3 times after
Oh, wow.
letting them know that he had passed away.
Huh. Yeah, I asked that because my husband and I got COVID last October, mid-October last year.
Okay.
And we tested positive, so we got the contact tracing call separately.
Hmm.
And we were like, I didn't realize they were going to call that quickly. And we had already talked about where we'd been and what we had done. And really, we didn't do much of anything because I wanted to stay home, shop from home, do everything so that when my mom's memory care opened, I could go in.
Right.
That was my goal. My 100% goal was that. So I was pretty much at home, and everywhere I went, if I did go anywhere, I wore a mask. And so my mom had passed away by that point, and my husband and I finally decided to go out and go to one of those outdoor golf ranges with a couple of friends.
Hmm.
And a week and a half later, we both got COVID. And I don't know if it was that because it seems kind of far as like the timing goes, but that was the only thing that we could think of. And that was outdoors. We were outdoors and everybody around us wore masks and it was in, social distance space. But yeah, I got the contact tracing call twice because when I tested again, I tested positive a second time. So I had to isolate for a full month.
Mm. Wow.
And by the second time, I felt like, okay, you guys are calling me again. I have not gone anywhere.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Put all those pieces together. It's just
Hmm.
so difficult. I can also relate to what you said about your father saying that the way he hurt. I don't know. Did you describe it like he felt like he was on fire?
Yes.
Yeah. I felt like my bones were on fire.
Wow.
And I kept explaining that to my husband, like, every time I moved, I just felt like my hips particularly were just on fire on the inside of my body. It was a very, very difficult illness to go through. I mean, it was long and hard for me, and I'm
Um,
glad, that I didn't end up in the hospital, but it gave me a sense of how much my pain my mom must have been in,
yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's true.
So,
It's when I think about the day that he fell and he coded, right the day before he was intubated, there was recently on the news, there was an image of people laying on the floor waiting to be called to a hospital. And my sister was saying that he was trying to lay on the floor.
mm,
Whatever reason that is, that the floor gives them comfort, or I don't know if it's just the coldness, but she was the one that was trying to tell him, "Dad, stay in bed." And my dad kept saying, "No, I want to lay on the floor. I'm not comfortable. I
mm,
want to lay on the floor." And that's when she three-wayed me in, and then I can hear what was going on in the scuffle between the nurses and him. And so, I like you said right now, and you went through it. You felt it.
yeah,
Thankfully, you came out of it, and you were able to recover. Um, but for your mom, my dad, and everyone else, I think of everyone that has passed away from it, and just that like sense of just, you know, anguish in that
yeah,
moment, what they're going through. And I know for my sister and I, we always think about what he was thinking at that moment. He was intubated. We don't know, we didn't get to
mhm,
talk to him before. And so I'm sure he was scared. And, I was telling my sister earlier, because I told her about the podcast, and I'm like, I'm nervous. She said, "Don't be,
mm,
just talk about who he was, and, all your great memories." And, she said something that resonated with me. She said, "My dad was very independent. There was a language barrier, yes, and we were his voice for almost everything growing up. My sister had to translate for him for legal and medical reasons, and as I got older, then I became, the caretaker as well, or the helper, I should say, the translator for him." She said, "But My dad was very smart. She said he would always find a way to get things done. And so, I think those are moments where I think about it and I'm like, okay, I just hope he wasn't, looking for us. I wonder, and those are
Hmm.
the thoughts that I think sometimes, are part of that grief as well. Just, accepting of what it was and what it is, and just praying that he went fast, and
Hmm.
didn't feel that pain at the very end, because my mom thinks he passed away before he actually passed away. She thinks his soul was already gone, and
Hmm.
she said it. She said that the night before he passed on the 28th, on Wednesday, it was about 10 or 11. She said maybe a couple hours before he passed. She said I had a feeling, like a really strong feeling. She said, and I just started praying. She said, I told God, if it's his time, take him, please, just so he's not suffering anymore. And if it's not his time, then please wake him up, for my
Yeah.
kids. And a couple hours later, he passed away, So she says that, there was something that was just telling her to pray and to just say that to God. And I think we're all in the different stages. My
Hmm.
mom in a place where it was her husband, and she's able to kind of feel that sense of peace with her praying. And my sister and I are more in a, we deal with it day by day. Our emotions are different every day, and the best way I describe it, it's like a wave. It's a wave. Just there's moments where it takes you under and you feel like you can't breathe. And then there's
Yeah.
moments where it brings you up and you're like, okay, I'm gonna be okay today. Today's, and then it just brings you right back under,
Yeah.
you know. But I can't imagine, what you guys go through, or, what you've gone through and what they've gone through. And,
Yeah. How do you feel that things are in California right now? Do you feel like the community and the way things are being handled are appropriate to the situation? Do you wish that government was doing more right now, or do you feel how do you feel about all that?
I I honestly I feel like they should be doing more. The numbers aren't, they're still there. People are still dying,
Mhm.
and even though they say, oh, we're dropping the numbers. I mean, they're dropping, but they pick up. They tend to pick up and then they drop and then they pick up again. And so, I just honestly, I was really upset when they opened everything up on June 15th. I was like, what are they thinking? Why are they opening everything up if there's still people dying? And, and then, with the schools and the mask mandates and so many people against it. And I'm pro living. So, if masks are going to save us, then let the children wear their masks, allow the mask mandates. I mean, for me, I have 3 little ones. And so I just keep them home. And I'm very blessed that I am able to keep them home because of
Mhm.
the job that I'm able to, work from home. But I know there's families that have to go to work and they have to send their children to school. And, I see posts on Facebook of friends that send their kids to school and they're like, there's been 5 cases and now we're quarantined for a week or 2 weeks. And, and it's so scary
Yeah.
being out in society right now, because you have the anti-masks and then you have the pro-masks. And, you just, to me, you can never be too careful or too safe. So, for me, I feel like it's being handled so inappropriately. I think it should be mandated. I think masks should be mandated. I know that there's a lot of parents that are, anti-mask, and, it's a freedom of speech, and, there's so many arguments against it. But if masks are saving lives, then, they should be able to continue that. It's a it's not a choice, because this disease doesn't give us a choice if we're going to die or if we're going to live. It takes it just takes some people, and we don't know who's going to be taken away from this virus.
Yeah.
So, I do feel like government should be doing more, as far as how everything is being handled. And I know there's a lot of great organizations out there that are working towards so many, so many things, so many wonderful things. And, I started diving into some of these organizations because I wanted to continue to have my dad's story told, and, do things that I felt like were honoring him in so many ways.
Hmm.
And I know that there's some resolutions out there right now to, create a memorial day, a permanent memorial day, so, I'm
Yeah.
hoping that they do, go through along with a lot of these, um, things that will help us in the grieving process, for a
Yeah.
lot of people. But, I do wish that the government was doing a lot more. And I think it's just, they get so much bad publicity, and our governor was almost, taken out of office because of a lot of his decisions, and I think it's just because people don't agree. And he was one of the first to shut down California when COVID happened. So I think people are just upset at that, but I think that was the right choice, but then you see them, and then they're doing things where they're out, in restaurants without masks and stuff. And then you're
Yeah.
like, we gotta kind of preach, we have to follow our own,
Right.
protocols and stuff. So, you know,
Yeah, that was a rough one. I
yeah.
saw that too. I know. Oh, goodness. Yeah. So you mentioned the National Memorial. Have you submitted your dad's name to any of the memorials that have been going on around the country?
Yes, I have actually. There's the COVID-19 Memorial Rami's Heart,
Hmm.
and she's based out in New Jersey. And she ended up opening it up for everyone, nationwide. So I was able to put his name and my father-in-law's name, in their, display.
Hmm.
And so, I also, put my dad's information in the COVID quilt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
my dad and my father-in-law, my sister-in-law put my father-in-law's information, because I told her, "Hey, if you wanna put anything special for your dad," and so she did. So both of them have their own quilt, or their patch in the quilt.
Hmm.
Um, and then we also through Ramie's Heart, we had, teddy bears made with his clothing. So I was able to purchase one for my sister, my mom, and myself. So it's
Oh.
his pajamas, and so I hug him every night, and, it says "Pop" on his leg, and so, I have him close to me, and the girls love him, so they always hug him.
Oh,
So,
that's so
yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, I
Mm,
saw those hearts on, or the bears, the teddy bears on
yes.
Instagram.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so we've been
And the
able to.
COVID quilt is that's Madeline in Florida, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
I've had a tough time with those memorials because I feel like if I send my mom's name in, then it makes it more real.
right.
But I did send her name into the flags that they did in Washington, D.C.
Oh, that's beautiful. I missed that one, but that's beautiful. I'm glad you got to put it in.
Yeah, it was very emotional, as I'm sure getting those teddy bears in the mail were probably very emotional too.
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely. I think just in any piece of memory that you put out there in the universe with their name, it reminds you of what you're
Hmm.
missing every day, you
Yeah.
know? So it's always
And
hard.
what was your dad's name? I think sometimes it really helps to just say it out loud.
His name was Manuel Juarez.
Thank you. Thank you for.
No, thank you. My sister honored my dad very beautifully. She named her newborn baby after my dad. She gave him his middle name. So my nephew has Manuel in his name, and I thought it was the most beautiful, thing. A beautiful way to honor my dad, because now she'll always have my dad's name.
Yeah, always have them close.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I know for us here locally, I live in Hayward. So, I've been trying to push the city to do a proclamation to honor all the victims and survivors, so that, not just nationwide, but also just locally, because it's
Hmm.
also a way for people to be able to grieve together,
Yeah.
and So I'm trying to, push little things that just sometimes for me, I feel like I go overboard and then I kind of take a step back and then I'm like, wait, I'm in school, I'm working and I have the 3 kids, so,
Yeah.
I do what we can and, try to honor my dad in any way that I can find.
Yeah. Yeah, doing something like that at the community level, and I know the Oakland area is very populated, so taking the smaller cities
Mhm.
and building community there. And then you meet other people who have suffered a loss of someone to COVID, which I find is very helpful. I don't know anybody personally in my life here in Oregon who has. So this podcast and talking to other people, it helps me because otherwise I just feel very alone
Mhm.
in what I'm going through.
Right. Right.
So I have one last question. A lot of people talk about the quote unquote, I'm making air quotes, new normal, which I really it annoys me. But
Mhm.
how do you feel changed by your loved one's loss and adjusting to your own, new normal in life with this grief and all of this that you are carrying with you and your husband now and your family?
Right. For us, there is no normal.
Mm,
Everyone is so, rushed to want to get back out there and just forget about everything and put it behind us and open up the economy and everything. But for us, there is no normal. We're having to learn to live without them. We're having to learn to live without calling them every day or hearing their voices or just seeing their faces or their smell. Those are the things that for me, it's hard to accept that, people are so eager to get back out and do all these things again and get back out there and, normalcy is what they call it, the normalcy of life,
mhm.
and when, we're having to build our life around acceptance of, not being able to see them, not being able to touch them, not being able to smell them anymore. So for us, it's just there is no normal. We're learning to cope and to live a life where all we can do is just think about them and miss them. That's all we can do.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It's such a word that for us it doesn't make sense because we will never have our normal back.
Yeah, it's just different.
It is. It's very different.
Well, thank you so much, Nora, for talking to me today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jennifer, for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm very grateful that you have this podcast and that we're able to tell our stories.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's important that we don't forget that each one of those numbers, as those numbers climb, it's easy for you to just go, oh, it's a higher number than last time. But each one of those numbers is a person who
Yeah.
died.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Somebody that we loved, somebody that we
Yes.
missed. Agreed.
Yes.
Thank you, Jennifer. I really
Yes.
appreciate it.
And that's the show, everyone. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. If you like this episode, please share the show. Share it with your friends, share it on your social media, and once you've done that, rate and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. And then go rate it on Apple Podcast, because that's where most of our new listeners come from. Ratings and reviews are the main way this podcast finds new listeners. So please, share the show. Until next time.